Over his legendary run, Johnny Carson sat across from tens of thousands of people. Movie stars hawking their latest films, musicians promoting new records, writers pushing their books, standard late-night fare. But certain guests were something else entirely. They made Johnny laugh so uncontrollably he could barely keep broadcasting. These performers were so hilarious that Carson would simply lean back, surrender the show completely, and wipe tears from his eyes like any ordinary viewer at home. Here are 15 guests who made Johnny Carson laugh harder than anyone else. Harvey Korman, The Art of Falling Apart. Harvey Korman transformed losing composure into high comedy. He'd collapse mid-sentence, bury his face in his hands, and beg Johnny for mercy while audiences howled. His years performing sketches taught him something crucial. Sometimes laughing at your own material becomes funnier than the material itself. Carson absolutely loved watching him disintegrate. Korman's legendary reputation from Carol Burnett's show preceded him onto Carson's couch, where the slightest stumble could trigger complete hysterics. His inability to maintain composure became its own running gag. Meta-comedy, where the meltdown was the actual punchline. Viewers anticipated it. Johnny quietly encouraged it. And when it finally arrived, when Harvey's shoulders started shaking and his voice cracked, everyone in that studio felt like conspirators witnessing something special. He'd begin telling a story, dissolve into giggles, attempt recovery, then break down again, creating a feedback loop with the crowd. Every hesitation and delayed reaction was impeccably timed. It appeared spontaneous but was masterfully constructed. Johnny recognized the tremendous skill required to seem like you're falling apart on command. Mel Brooks, Theatrical Tornado. Rapid and theatrical, Mel Brooks could transform any random object on set into comedy gold. He deliberately overwhelmed the Tonight Show format, pulling Johnny into songs, routines, and explosions of pure madness. Brooks treated that stage like his personal playground, climbing furniture, grabbing Carson physically, launching into operatic performances. Looking away was impossible because predicting his next move was impossible. He'd start responding to a simple question and suddenly perform an entire film complete with character voices and sound effects. Johnny would double over helplessly while audiences screamed with laughter. Even commercial breaks barely slowed him down. Mel continued performing as cameras faded to black. Bob Newhart, Quiet Devastation. Dry, impeccably timed monologues made Bob Newhart absolutely irresistible. His soft, nervous delivery drew audiences in so tightly that even the smallest punchlines landed enormously. His legendary one-sided telephone conversations demonstrated how he could construct entire scenes using only pauses and reactions. Carson adored Newhart's surgical precision. Small, understated, expertly calibrated. While most comedians went huge, Newhart went whisper quiet, making every syllable count. Johnny tried maintaining his composure, but whenever Bob found his rhythm, Carson inevitably cracked. Breaking character was the ultimate compliment, and Newhart earned it nearly every appearance. Sammy Davis Jr., the complete package. Impressions, musical numbers, spontaneous comedy. Sammy Davis Jr. delivered everything. His machine gun celebrity impressions left Johnny howling as he ricocheted from song to joke to dance move without warning. A routine guest segment transformed into a complete variety show. Within minutes, he'd shift from Dean Martin to Sinatra to Cagney, each voice and mannerism flawless. Carson loved versatile performers, and Sammy represented the ultimate entertainer. Singing, dancing, acting, impressions, instruments, whatever the moment demanded. His appearances felt like genuine events because spectacular things always happened. Johnny would simply provide the setup and watch Sammy commandeer everything, thrilled to witness a true Vegas legend working at full power. David Letterman, the heir apparent. Before launching his own late-night empire, David Letterman delivered sharp, sardonic humor that played beautifully against Carson's straight-man reactions. Johnny's pride was visible whenever Letterman appeared. He permitted Dave to mock the entire concept of talk shows. Their dry exchanges felt like a torch being quietly passed between generations. Letterman possessed that Midwestern ironic sensibility Carson understood perfectly. Dave would ridicule the desk, the chair, the curtain, the entire Tonight Show apparatus, and Johnny would play along as though sharing the joke, which he was. Carson recognized himself in Letterman. Identical deadpan delivery, identical willingness to undercut show business pretension. Dave wasn't attempting to become the next Johnny Carson, but Johnny clearly believed he could be. The mutual respect was unmistakable. When Letterman occupied that desk, it wasn't merely another comedian promoting something. It was Johnny acknowledging someone who understood. Someone who knew the best comedy emerged from honesty and timing, not from straining too hard. Reynolds and DeLuise. Beautiful chaos. Pure comedic warfare every single visit. Whipped cream battles. Furniture-destroying pranks. Reynolds pouring water over DeLuise's head. Johnny Carson rarely regained control during these appearances. Their segments resembled unscripted brawls between overgrown children, with Johnny trapped helplessly in the middle. Reynolds and DeLuise together were absolute pandemonium. They'd plan bits beforehand, then abandon every plan and simply start destroying each other. Dom would crack up at his own jokes. Bert would physically assault him. They'd tumble across the floor. They'd demolish the set. Audiences adored it because it genuinely seemed out of control. Johnny attempted conducting interviews, but it was futile. Bert and Dom were too occupied trying to make each other laugh, and in doing so, made everyone else laugh too. Carson eventually learned to simply step aside. He'd ask one question, then lean back as Reynolds and DeLuise transformed the program into a comedy boxing match. Sometimes Johnny participated, throwing something at them or offering sarcastic commentary, but mostly he just observed and laughed. Their segments became must-see television because outcomes were unpredictable, except that complete insanity was guaranteed. Richard Pryor, raw truth, loose, sharp, absolutely fearless. Richard Pryor's casual storytelling seemed completely improvised, yet every word was perfectly calibrated. Carson respected Pryor immensely, visible in how Johnny listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't attempt steering conversations. He simply let Richard work. Pryor's presence transformed the studio atmosphere. He could pivot from outrageous to vulnerable in a single beat, leaving Johnny and audiences simultaneously stunned and laughing. Richard would tell stories about his childhood, his family, his battles with substances, and somehow made everything hilarious without diminishing the pain. That balance defined his genius. He was honest in ways other comedians weren't, and Johnny provided space for that honesty. Their conversations felt authentic, unlike typical Tonight Show interviews where everything was polished and safe. Richard pushed boundaries. He used language that made network executives sweat, but Johnny protected him. Carson understood Pryor was special, that his comedy originated from a place of truth impossible to fabricate. So he let Richard be Richard. The results were among the most unforgettable segments in Tonight Show history. Tim Conway, the slow burn master, slow developing storytelling and physical comedy that frequently caused Johnny to literally slide from his chair laughing. Tim Conway's secret weapon was stretching bits far past their apparent expiration point. He'd take simple stories and extend them until audiences grew almost uncomfortable. Then he'd add the tiniest gesture, an eyebrow lift, a pause, a subtle head turn, and the entire room would erupt. Conway understood commitment's power. He'd remain completely stone-faced while describing the most absurd scenarios. Johnny would be losing control across the desk while Tim continued as though nothing was funny. That contrast amplified everything. Carson tried maintaining composure during Conway's segments but rarely succeeded. Tim would describe something mundane, a dentist visit perhaps, but his telling, with all the physical comedy and perfect timing, transformed it into an epic saga. By the end, Johnny would be wiping away tears and begging Tim to stop because he couldn't breathe. That was Conway's gift, making the ordinary extraordinary through pure commitment and timing. Joan Rivers, absolutely no filter. Rapid-fire comedic assaults targeting Hollywood, marriage, and herself. Joan Rivers regularly left Johnny Carson pounding his desk with laughter. She brought ruthless honesty that sliced through The Tonight Show's polished surface, and Johnny loved watching her say things other comedians feared touching. She would attack celebrities by name. She'd joke about plastic surgery before it became common. She'd discuss her marriage, her body, her career with self-deprecating brutality that shocked television audiences of that era. Johnny respected that fearlessness. Rivers never held back. She never softened material for Tonight Show audiences. She came swinging every appearance, and Carson provided the platform for it. He encouraged her. He laughed at her most outrageous lines. He let her push boundaries other guests couldn't approach. Their relationship was genuine. Mutual respect obvious to anyone watching. Johnny viewed Joan as a real comedian, not a female comedian. And she rewarded that respect by being absolutely hilarious every time she sat down. The tragedy was how their relationship ended over the Fox show situation. But during those years when Joan was a Tonight Show regular, she ranked among the funniest guests Johnny ever hosted. Steve Martin, absurdist perfection. Steve Martin brought magic tricks designed to fail spectacularly. Banjo jokes. Deadpan one-liners delivered with complete earnestness. His chemistry with Johnny was razor sharp. Martin played the clueless weirdo flawlessly against Carson's straight man. They transformed simple desk props into enormous laughs. Martin understood timing better than almost anyone. He knew precisely when silence should do the work. Johnny would ask normal questions, and Steve would respond with something completely absurd delivered as though it made perfect sense. Then they'd stare at each other for 3 seconds before audiences exploded. Martin also brought props. The arrow through the head, the bunny ears, the white suit. Everything about his appearance was designed for ridiculousness, and Johnny played along perfectly. He'd pretend taking Steve seriously, which made the absurdity even funnier. Their segments felt like two comedians who understood exactly what the other was doing and were enjoying the game immensely. Rodney Dangerfield, one-liner machine. Nobody could match Rodney's velocity. One-liner after one-liner after one-liner, each landing harder than the last. No respect, his signature phrase. And he delivered it with flawless timing every single time. Johnny loved Rodney Dangerfield. You could see it in his reactions. Carson would sit there practically counting punchlines, anticipating the next one, laughing harder as Rodney tugged his collar and escalated the desperation. Rodney's entire persona revolved around failure and humiliation. My wife, my doctor, my kids. Nobody respects me. And he sold it so perfectly that even when you knew jokes were coming, you still laughed. Johnny would attempt follow-up questions, and Rodney would simply steamroll through with 5 more jokes. The interviews barely qualified as interviews. They were just Rodney performing stand-up at the desk while Johnny tried keeping pace. And Carson never seemed to mind. He'd lean back and let Rodney work. Sometimes Johnny would wipe his eyes. Sometimes he'd pound the desk. But mostly, he'd just laugh and shake his head in amazement at the relentless joke velocity. Jonathan Winters, one-man universe. Winters would create entire characters from coffee cups, ashtrays, anything sitting on Johnny's desk. Carson would let him run completely wild. Sometimes Johnny deliberately handed Winters random objects just to witness what would emerge. Then he'd collapse laughing as Jonathan constructed entire worlds around a stapler. Winters needed no script, no preparation, just a spark, and his mind would generate something insane. He'd pick up a pencil and it became a fishing rod. Then he became the fish. Then the fisherman's angry wife. Then the boat. All happening in real time with zero planning. Johnny loved that chaos. He loved not knowing where Winters was heading. The danger of live television became the appeal. Anything could happen. And with Jonathan Winters, anything usually did. He'd sometimes get so deep into a character that Johnny had to physically stop him for commercial breaks. And even then, Winters would stay in character through the entire break. The man was fearless and completely unpredictable, exactly what made great television. Bob Hope, the living legend. Bob Hope was a comedy titan whose Tonight Show appearances became genuine events. Razor-sharp timing refined over decades. Perfectly crafted jokes delivered with effortless confidence. Hope and Carson had chemistry that felt like two professionals sparring for pleasure. Carson always lit up when Hope emerged through the curtain. You could see Johnny was genuinely honored trading jokes with a hero who could still destroy a monologue after 50 years in show business. Hope never coasted. Even in later years, when other comedians his age were declining, Bob Hope would appear on The Tonight Show and deliver topical jokes, political zingers, self-deprecating material about aging, and the timing was always flawless. Johnny respected Hope immensely. They'd volley back and forth like a tennis match. Johnny would set up jokes, and Bob would spike them. Then Bob would set one up, and Johnny would return it. Audiences were watching two masters at work. Hope represented old-school show business, the kind Johnny had grown up admiring. So when Bob Hope sat at that desk, it was more than just another guest. It was Johnny getting to work with one of his idols. And Hope clearly enjoyed it too. He treated Johnny as an equal, not some lucky kid, as a real comedian who earned his position. Don Rickles, the insult king. Don Rickles walked onto the Tonight Show set like he owned the building. He roasted Johnny directly to his face. He roasted audiences. He roasted Doc Severinsen and the band. He roasted anyone unfortunate enough to enter his sightline. His chaotic energy was legendary. The cigarette box incident became one of Tonight Show history's most iconic moments. Rickles was guest hosting when he broke Johnny's prized cigarette box during a bit. Days later, Johnny appeared unannounced on the set of Rickles' show CPO Sharkey to exact revenge. The danger with Rickles was half the joke. Nobody in that studio knew who he'd attack next. Carson would sit there grinning, but you could see him waiting for the next insult aimed directly at him. And when it arrived, he'd double over laughing. Rickles treated Johnny like an old friend, which meant showing absolutely zero mercy. He'd mock Johnny's marriages, his clothes, his haircut. Nothing was off limits. That was their dynamic's magic. Johnny respected Rickles enough to let him say things no other guest would dare attempt. Robin Williams, the unstoppable force. Robin Williams didn't do interviews. He did performance art disguised as conversation, improvised characters exploding from nowhere, non-stop movement and physical comedy. His jokes arrived so rapidly that Johnny could barely catch his breath between laughs. Williams would become a Russian poet, then a British preacher, then a Southern grandmother, all within 30 seconds. Carson often leaned back and simply let Robin destroy the room. You could watch Johnny stop being the host and become just another audience member. The desk became a stage. The chair became a prop. Williams would grab Johnny's coffee cup and transform it into a puppet. He'd use the microphone as a golf club. Anything within reach became part of the act. And Johnny loved every second. These performers understood that Tonight Show appearances weren't merely about promotion. They were about creating moments, making Johnny laugh, making audiences remember you forever. Who do you think was the funniest guest Johnny Carson ever hosted? Think someone else deserves a spot on this list? Drop your pick in the comments. And if you want more unforgettable stories from Carson's Tonight Show era, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for the next video.